Hello, and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. I'm Mr. 50mm. In today's installment of Does Chris Only Have Nikon F-Mount Camera Bodies, a 214-part series, we're going to have a look at the Nikon D600 right here. I was originally going to look around and have a, Nikon D700, but then I realized that Nikon D600s routinely popped up for a little bit less money, and, the deal was sealed. The D600 is a much newer camera. It has a bit of baggage, which we'll get into, but I took my chances. I bought one anyways. So, let's get into it. What is the Nikon D600? This is the Nikon D600. It's a full-frame DSLR introduced by Nikon on the 13th of September in 2012. The D600 sports a 24.3 megapixel CMOS sensor with an ISO range of 100 to 6400, and it can be boosted to 25,600 ISO. The shutter is good for 30 seconds to 1/4000th of a second, and it can flash sync at 1/200th of a second. It's a DSLR, so it has a optical finder, very good, and that finder has 100% coverage, also good. The camera itself, it shoots at 5.5 FPS, and it supports dual SD card slots. The autofocus module on the Nikon D600 is the Nikon Multicam 4800, and this sports 39 focus points, with 9 of those being the more sensitive cross-type points. Metering is done via the 3D color matrix metering system, version 2, and that is equipped with 2016 RGB pixels as the sensor for the metering. The rear of the camera, that is a 3.2-inch color LCD, has a 921 K dot, and the body is made from magnesium alloy, and it's weather sealed, so it can take a bit of weather. This thing, the camera, being from 2012, means that it also has 1080p video shooting capabilities, and when the camera was new, it was $2,099 USD, or about $2,855 in modern 2024 dollars. It weighs in at 760 grams, roughly 0.76 plana, and this of course is without battery, lens, or an SD card. So, the camera fully empty. So hey, what's that asterisk? Well, some of you may remember back in the day when the D600 was new, it was very rapidly replaced by the Nikon D610, which replaced it only 13 months after it was released. And it seemed like not much had changed going from the D600 to D610. Now, the D600 rapidly gained a bad reputation, and this was for rapidly accumulating sensor dust, and some units had oil droplets from the shutter that appeared on the sensor, and that's kind of difficult to clean, the oil. Now, the problem got so bad that the D600 was actually banned from China in 2014, and in February of 2013, Nikon actually issued a service advisory for affected units. A year after that, they actually offered full shutter replacements for Nikon D600s, and according to some websites, some D600s were just straight up replaced with D610s when they went in for the replacement. So, if you are considering to get one of these, hopefully by now, most of the units that are available, they're clearly going to be used, but hopefully the ones, again, in circulation aren't affected by this issue, and either have new shutters or never had the problem to begin with. But, as per, shopping for used items, always do your due diligence and give a quick check. Basically, grab a photo, point it on a bright spot, and close down the shutter, take photo, and see if you notice any excessive dark dust spots. Or, put the sensor in sensor cleaning and have a look visually directly. Hopefully you don't get anything and your unit is good to go. But, if you can snag one that doesn't have the issue, it might be worth it, and we'll get into why shortly. Why is this camera so close to perfect? I'm probably a tiny bit biased, as you might have noticed, especially if you watched my Nikon D200 review. And if not, video for that is down below in the description. But as I said, the D200 would be a perfect camera if it had a full-frame CCD sensor, and it'd be even better if it were a CCD sensor made by Kodak. Now, that's not going to happen, but that's okay, because we got the D600 instead. Now, it's a camera that, according to some reviewers, was based on the D7000, which that's an APS-C camera that was made to slot between the Nikon D90 and the D300S. As a result, a lot of the ergonomics that are derived from the D90 and D300S make the D600 feel really solid, really well thought out, and it gives a lot of users the best mix between prosumer and consumer controls. For example, the D600 has foregone the 3-button cluster on top of the top left of the camera. As you can see, here is the D600 with a more traditional mode select dial, and D200 over here, we got those 3 cluster button thingies. Now, it also, however, still retained the shooting mode selector just underneath that dial, as you can see in the back right here. Oh, there we go. This ring there. Maybe hard for you to see, but it is there, and I'll actuate that now. There you go. Now, the 3 buttons, they didn't just disappear, they were remapped. Now, it's a small touch, but these ergonomic improvements help the camera, you know, get really nice, or have a really nice feel in the hands. Now, the custom button that was just below the aperture preview, that kind of got tucked away and does make it a little less easy to use, but hey, not all their changes were perfect. Now, the menu system, that still very typical Nikon, and therefore needs very little words. It's a no-nonsense menu that's easy to navigate. Now, one thing I think that is fairly neat is the weight and size. Now, again, using the D7000 as the base means that overall, it's smaller than the D300S. Consequentially, that also means it's smaller than the Nikon D200. Now, it's not a massive difference, but the camera is still very comfortable to hold in the hands. And even though the D600 has a full frame sensor, it weighs less than a D300S or D200. Now, another difference that you can see that was a result of cost cutting was that the shutter, it no longer goes to 1/8000th, it goes to only 1/4000th words. Now, not a massive deal breaker, but something to keep in mind if you do like shooting the wide open in daylight. Now, again, another thing that did get changed as a result of the going between your prosumer and consumer model is that AF module. The module in there, like I said, the 4800, that is meant to slot between the D90 and D300. So it's not as nice as the D300 module, but it's a big step up from the D200 and a big step up from the D90. Now, something that is kind of fun that you will notice if you look through the D600 Finder is that all the AF points are really actually clustered in the center of the frame. And it does seem that's because the module is kind of directly lifted off the D7000. So if you shoot the camera in the DX crop mode, then with the DX frame lines, the module appears to have a more like even spread. But in the full frame mode, it does appear like it is quite clustered in the center. Now, that being said, the AF module is still sufficiently quick and it can do tracking of a lot of like things, and you can reliably get some pretty good sports shots with it. I mean, as always, like I say with these DSLR cameras, it's not going to have the ability to detect between the difference between a winking moth and a blinking butterfly, such as when you get modern AF from modern mirrorless camera systems. but it's going to offer quick, predictable autofocus nonetheless. Let's talk images. Now, I said before, this is no CCD sensor. There's a CMOS sensor at the heart of this camera, but it's a great sensor. Specifically, it is the Sony IMX128 LAQP. Another one of these sensor names that rolls off the tongue. Now, this is the same sensor that is found in the more expensive Nikon D750. Honestly, there isn't much to say here when it comes to the sensor. It lives up to basically all the modern shooting standards. No caveats here about resolution or being good for the time of release, or dynamic range being wider than I remember, but worse than a modern camera. Nope, none of that. This sensor, however, it does have an anti-aliasing filter, but it seems fairly mild, so you're still going to get really good sharpness out of it. The dynamic range is from 2012, but that being said, this is on par with a lot of 24 megapixel sensors of today, the now times, and high ISO is only marginally worse. Now, that isn't to say that modern sensors haven't improved, but it is actually more to do with the sensor in this camera being just absolutely bonkers awesome. Additionally, the camera has a continuous shooting speed of 5.5 frames per second. Not a bad number for a full frame DSLR at the time, and let's give that a go. Ooh. Excellent. Now, I also find that with this camera, the metering is really spot on. I haven't had the camera super long, a couple weeks at this point, but it hasn't ever tossed me a really weird curveball. Generally, it's been reliable, and there hasn't been a scenario where either I super blew the highlights or crushed, turbo crushed the blacks. But then again, I didn't ever shoot this into super tough scenarios. I didn't directly put the sun directly in the middle of the frame with nothing in it and just tried to make a very tough scenario. But how I use it, I haven't come across a problem that this camera couldn't handle in terms of dynamic range. Lastly, battery life on the D600, super rated for 900 shots. And yeah, I believe it. I believe that the 900 shots is doable with the fact that the flappy mirror in these things save battery life. So this camera, it does shoot moving pictures, the movie mode. It'll do that at 1080p, and it has a selection of frame rates. Now, the camera is a DSLR, so, when you are shooting in the movie mode, the AF in it is going to be DSLR style contrast detect. And this was before contrast detect got good, so it was bad. Now, additionally, when you are shooting movie mode on the camera, if you have the autofocus on and you have one of the lenses that isn't geared towards quiet AF, most of the DSLR lenses are gonna make noise. It's gonna sound, like this. Hopefully you get that on the video, but this is one of the lenses with an inbuilt motor, and you're gonna hear it. They're just not optimized for movie. That being said, the camera does have a mic input, and honestly, I think for me, when I look at the video footage out of it, footage looks good. Again, not a great person to ask about the videos. I know I'm doing these videos, but I'm not a videographer, so I'm gonna input a clip. So I'll let the clip do the talking, and we'll have a look at that right now. So here's my recommendation. Now, the D600 currently sells for somewhere between $325 and $450 USD. That is actually cheaper than the current going rate for D700. Now, I assume part of the reason why the D600 price is low is just due to that terrible rap that it got in the, the 2012s and 2013s when the camera was new, and there were just reviews everywhere lambasting the sensor oil problem. Now, I also assumed the D700 price is really high due to the current resurgence of these older cameras. And you know what? I remember having the D700 at some point in my past, like in 2012, 2013, and it's great. Does it justify the current price that's currently being asked for it? I don't know. I don't have one right now to test, but if you're not interested in the D700 hype and you want a camera that has a sensor that can punch with a modern full-frame camera and it is a DSLR, then the D600 I honestly think is the way to go. Just remember, check that the shutter doesn't have, isn't oiling up that sensor. And at this point, I assume most copies are, again, good to go, but better safe than sorry. My personal copy of the D600 here, this cost me about $375 USD. I'm genuinely shocked at how little money gets you a massively excellent camera. Yeah, couldn't phrase that better. But just a reminder, the sensor is the same one that they use in the D750 or something really close to it. It's very good. And that camera routinely sells for around $700 to $900 USD. Overall, I think that the D600 is the best value full frame censored DSLR camera that you can buy right now across any brand. Now, again, the bad rep from the past is probably currently working massively in our favor to keep the price down. However, I think as we discussed, it's not just the price that makes the D600 awesome. Ergonomics, they're excellent, absolutely to die for. Camera sensor, very much super relevant in terms of resolution, ISO, dynamic range, and all the good stuff. Now, the only thing that isn't super up to snuff, that AF module. It isn't, it's not that it's bad, it is actually considered a little worse than the one on the D700, but as I said, currently using it, I don't have a problem with the module, and I find that it's generally really pretty reliable, pretty snappy. Now, that being said, I primarily am a shooter of the Centerpoint Recompose, but once in a while I will use the other cross-type sensors and just move the sensor point to where I want it, give it a go, and I found it to be pretty good. Now, all that being said, I assume that if you want a D700, you're going to get a D700, and you probably want it for the experience of D700-ness. But if you aren't after the D700 hype and the D700 experience, have a serious look at the D600. Now, I know it's probably not going to really sway that many opinions, but as I said, this appears to be, at least for me, the best bang for buck. So that's all I got for the almost said D700. That's all I got for this video on the D600. What do you think of the D600? Do you remember the sensor oil fiasco? Did you have one during the tumultuous oily times? Or do you have one now, currently? Or would you consider getting one now? Let me know. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time. Bye.